So this video is just a reaction to the recent discovery I've had that one of my favourite movie directors, Christopher Nolan, is due to direct a World War II film, which is due out in July 2017 apparently, but that date could obviously change. But this is not necessarily cutting edge news. It's been known for a few months now, but I've only just found out myself, and this has got me really excited. I would say that this is already probably my most anticipated film for 2017, quite comfortably really, and I just wish it was coming this year, but you can't have it all. It's going to take a while to make this film. It's going to be pretty hard work, I think. So Christopher Nolan is probably, for my money at least, and for many people's, one of the best directors operating today. He just seems to be getting better and better, and probably The Prestige 2006 is my favourite film of his, and one of my favourite films of all time. I just keep going back to that film. I love the atmosphere of it. It's kind of ethereal and mysterious, with a fantastic musical score and great acting, great cast, and obviously the late David Bowie's in it, who plays Tesla, which is really cool to see now in particular. But also I'm a great fan of Inception from 2010. That's an absolutely epic film, probably one of my most memorable cinematic experiences, I'd say. So I keep a close eye on this guy, like many people do. I wasn't perhaps as blown away by Interstellar as many. I thought that was possibly his weakest film to date. Very good film though, but didn't quite grab me like some of his previous works, and perhaps it could be argued that The Dark Knight Rises as well. In hindsight, I liked it at the time, but having seen it since a few times, it probably isn't quite up there with his earlier films. But saying that though, it's obvious that he's gaining confidence, and he's upping the scale, upping the spectacle every time he makes a film. So this is a really interesting revelation about Dunkirk. I don't think anyone saw it coming. I certainly didn't see it coming. I figured he was going to make another sci-fi style film. I had this idea that he was going to do some sort of time travel based film, but no, he's going down a completely different path, and he's making a World War II film. So really the question is, what kind of World War II film will this be? And this is really the purpose of this video, I think, is just because I want to perhaps provide some thoughts on this based on what I know of Nolan. So I've seen many interviews of this guy over the years. I've followed his work quite closely, and I'm quite a film buff, and I sort of follow particular directors as opposed to actors or a genre. And with Nolan, he's a sort of polymath of cinema, and he knows about the roots of genre, and he understands that the great directors of previous decades, previous generations, have really made some films that still hold up today. And a lot of what Nolan does is based on these earlier films. And one of the first things that came into my head when I found out that he's due to direct a film about Dunkirk is that Nolan makes no secret of the fact that he's quite influenced by Stanley Kubrick, who's again one of my all-time favourite directors. And Kubrick made some brilliant war films in his early years. I've done a video a few years ago on Paths of Glory, which is one of my favourite war films, and one of my favourite films of all time really. I think it's just an absolutely incredible film. It doesn't feel dated at all, and that has some extraordinary battle scenes in. And I'm thinking first and foremost that Nolan is going to make a film. It's going to be his war film really. Every great director, I think, makes a war film at some point. Spielberg's done it obviously with Saving Private Ryan, which is a fantastic film, one of my favourites. I keep going back to that. I want to perhaps review that at some point. I keep meaning to do a video on that one. And every great director's done a war film. It's kind of, I can't really think of any offhand who haven't attempted it. And some of those war films are great, others perhaps not so great. some would say that when people think of Kubrick, they think, oh, his war film was Full Metal Jacket, and that's a war film, no doubt, and it's a great film. I think that's a fantastic film, Full Metal Jacket. But I would say that really his war film was Paths of Glory. That was his ultimate war film. But very few people nowadays have seen it unless they're film buffs, because it's obviously a pretty old film. And the black and white, unfortunately, tends to put many off, but it shouldn't. So I'm thinking Nolan's going to make a film that's going to be very much in the flavour of Paths of Glory, i.e. it's going to be quite a grim anti-war film, perhaps anti-establishment maybe, perhaps a little bit condemning of generals and of the higher echelons of command. That's just a theory, because one of the things about this film is that Nolan is writing the screenplay for it. He's got full artistic control, which makes me very excited, because this isn't going to be some hacky World War II film that Nolan's just going to direct in the kind of Ridley Scott style, where he sometimes just makes throwaway films. Although, again, Ridley Scott's one of my all-time favourite directors, who did Black Hawk Down, which is a great war film. But I digress. With Nolan, I think he's not going to make a hacky World War II film. He's not going to go down the Michael Bay, Pearl Harbor road with this. And people are already sort of worried that he might. I can almost guarantee that he won't do that, because I feel like I know the guy enough. I mean, obviously, I don't know him, but you know what I mean. I feel like I understand his vibe and where he's coming from as a human. So I feel that he's going to make a very anti-war film here. This isn't going to be a sort of piece of propaganda. So it's going to be a film about a very historical event, and I'm really glad that there is going to be a film about Dunkirk, because I've always thought for years that it would make a fantastic war film, and there was one made in the 50s, and I haven't actually seen it, to be honest, but I've always felt it needed the modern, epic, big budget treatment, because it really is a story that needs to be told, and there are many that perhaps don't know a great deal about it, but it's one of those really epochal moments in our history. And it really was a seminal battle of World War II in 1940. And I'm sure most of my subs will know, but perhaps people watching this video elsewhere may not. But I mean, Dunkirk was the biggest troop evacuation in history. I think over 330,000, mostly British, but many French and Allied troops got evacuated from northern France during the early phases of World War II in 1940. And there's a hell of a lot to be said about this battle, a lot of arguments about what the merits of the battle were, whether or not it can be perceived as a horrible defeat for the Brits or perhaps a bit of a victory. And really, as Churchill said, the famous quote is, it was a miracle of deliverance. So it really was a case of having to adapt very quickly to horrible circumstances, and civilians got involved in this, and I think civilians will play a crucial role in the film. I would have expected them to, because it wasn't just a military affair. Everyone who had a boat in Britain essentially had to get involved to help evacuate troops, and fishermen, civilians, you name it, they were coming down into northern France with a Royal Naval escort, of course, to try and keep the boats protected. I think over 800 boats were used at points during this event. But also there's a lot to be said about the spearheads and the diversion. The Brits did actually launch a counter strike, which almost like a feint, which the Germans didn't quite know how to react to, and there's an argument that Hitler perhaps reallocated certain units because expecting this massive counter that never quite came and all this business. I don't know a great deal about that, but it was something I was reading about recently. It's quite interesting. But also you've got the Luftwaffe element and the whole debate about why the Luftwaffe never really hammered the position on the beaches, and there's a whole debate about that. There was a lot going on, and there's a lot of history I don't think we know about that battle. I think there is even some rumours and suggestions that some of it's classified even to this day, which is interesting. But the British Expeditionary Force were heavily outnumbered, the BEF, and that was sort of like the Brits' early reaction force, if you like, to German aggression and to the start of World War II. And it's a whole thing about the French and what happened to the French army. They kind of, I don't think the Brits necessarily expected the French to get pushed back so quickly. So they were kind of caught with their pants down a little bit, because I think during 1940 and 39, basically the military and the generals were expecting a repeat of World War One. Anyway, I'm digressing and talking about World War Two history here. The point I really want to go back to is, I think Nolan will have done his homework with this film, and I think it's obvious that he is not going to do a hack job. He's going to make a really, really realistic film and a really historically accurate film about a really epic, potentially very cinematic event, really. And it kind of was a battle. I mean, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of naval confrontation in this, although interestingly I don't think there was necessarily a lot of ship on ship action in this, because the Germans didn't really have a navy that could compete with the Royal Navy. It was more about what was going on the ground in northern France. So there's probably going to be a lot of combat on the ground. I would have expected a lot of sequences of defence and rearguard action. I think up to 70,000 mostly British troops formed a sort of barrier to kind of protect the beaches, like a spearhead, and they held their ground for days, perhaps even weeks, I'm not entirely sure. But eventually they ran out of ammunition and supplies, and they kind of got surrounded, so they had to surrender, and most of them ended up being prisoners of war for the rest of World War II. So I'm sure that's going to feature heavily in this film. I think it has to. So, I mean, Nolan's got a big job here. This isn't just a sort of single battle about a particular location. It's not a sort of D-Day style situation where it's just a case of an attack on a beach. Obviously, there was a lot more going on D-Day, but you get my point in terms of what you're going to capture on film. But with Dunkirk, the scale of it was so incredible that it's going to be interesting to see what Nolan's thinking. I mean, is he going to focus on one particular aspect of Dunkirk, perhaps some true story of heroism about a particular character who, I don't know, some soldier or sailor? Or maybe he's going to want to try and go grander scale and sort of a top-down Richard Attenborough Bridge Too Far style approach, where it's going to be very much about generals talking about the plan, and we may even get a sort of from both sides style film where you've got the German higher echelons of command talking about how they need to take out the Brits and bomb the fuck out of the beaches, the Luftwaffe, get them in. It's going to be very interesting to see what Nolan's screenplay is all about, really. And I guess what I'm hoping is that it's going to essentially be a very, very realistic, no holds barred, epic scale, big budget World War II film. I mean, that's pretty much my dream, to be honest. A war film being directed by Nolan that's going to be a real attempt to make a very realistic film. And I think he can obviously do it. He's no doubt going to have the budget to make a grand scale film. This isn't going to be a atonement style film, which I thought was okay, but obviously there wasn't much in the way of battle sequences in that film. It wasn't really that kind of film. But obviously this film needs to have character. It can't just be one big geeky war film. I appreciate you need character, obviously. So he's probably got some interesting idea about character. He's probably got some angle he's going to roll with. And it's interesting to note that Tom Hardy apparently has been confirmed. So I would have expected Hardy to probably be a lead role, perhaps a soldier, or he could be a sailor. He could be on one of the boats trying to help people out. He may not, I'm hoping he's going to be a sort of Tommy style soldier, Lee Enfield in hand, if you get my drift, like trying to perhaps part of the rearguard action to, I don't know, up the action ante, perhaps, who knows. But I mean, it's just going to be interesting to know what he does with it. Mark Rylance is also apparently going to be in it. He's a fantastic stage actor. He was really good in Bridge of Spies. He got the Oscar for Best Supporting Actor, I think, yesterday. So that's going to be really interesting to see. I suspect he's probably going to play a general or something like that. Who knows? He may even play Churchill for all I know. It's just pure speculation at the moment. So yeah, I'm really excited about this. I'm glad Nolan's doing a film like this. Many people, I think, were probably expecting Nolan to just carry on with the sci-fi trend and to make another sort of weird mystery film pushing this sort of envelope. But this is going to be a very different Nolan film. This is going to be a kind of Nolan trying to aspire to the Kubricks and the Spielbergs. I think I would have imagined he's going to try and make this really, really brutal and hard-hitting. And I'm hoping. I would hate to see a sort of lesser Nolan World War II film. I think Nolan needs to go all out with this and really go to town on it. And hopefully we're going to see a really good film that portrays Dunkirk in a realistic light, because it's a really great piece of hopefully it will potentially be a really great piece of storytelling, and it will keep the history alive, as they say. And I recently saw, for example, other Kubrick war films. I mean, Doctor Strangelove, people don't think of that as being a particularly great war film in terms of battle sequences, but actually when you watch that film, I was amazed at how good the battle scenes were in that. They're absolutely brilliant, the battle scenes in Doctor Strangelove. They're truly excellent, and they were the inspiration, I think, behind a lot of what Spielberg did with Private Ryan, the way he shot it in that sort of documentary style handy-cam way. But also there's obviously a great deal of war films that Nolan can draw inspiration from, but I get the sense that they're the main ones. We're talking Paths of Glory, Doctor Strangelove, Full Metal Jacket, Saving Private Ryan. I'm thinking those are going to be the films that Nolan's going to be looking at the most to draw inspiration from. So that's exciting. If that's the route he's going down, he may not be. I'm pretty sure he would be. I just don't think he's the kind of director that's going to go down the, like I said earlier, Pearl Harbor road. So we'll see. But yeah, this is great news. I'm very excited. I think this is going to be the film that I'm certainly going to be looking out for in 2017. Just a shame it's so long away. But I suspect we'll probably see a trailer by Christmas. Who knows? So yeah, great news. Very pumped indeed.